Hello and welcome once again to the Dwarven Tavern. I am your host, Lyric, bringing you another beginner's video. I realize it has been a while. On top of being busy with literally everything else, I underwent surgery recently and I'm still recovering from that. That's why my cheeks are so puffy and round and swollen and bruised and in pain. But I'll ignore it for the sake of this video. I realize that you guys might be a little deprived of my beginner's videos, so here we go. Though, to be fair, this is not just a beginner's video. This is a video I'm also titling video that you might not have thought about, or topic you might not have thought about video for advanced players, experienced gamers, what have you. So this is the topic of this beginner's video is pros to cons. I don't mean like going from pros to cons, I mean the pros of cons. So, what does that mean, Lyric? Well, it has come to my attention that a lot of people may or may not know about disadvantages to their characters, giving their characters more personality, more likability. Having a character with a flaw can make it more of an experience that might draw you in more to the character. A lot of people I have come across don't actually know about this topic, and even characters that I have, not characters, but players that I've talked to, they don't seem to know that this is an option that they can take. This is an avenue that they can explore. So I wanted to talk to you about it, and for new gamers, this is something that you will have a leg up on when you get into the gaming community. So, what does that mean? It means that there are pros to cons. There are advantages to disadvantages. Now, what does that mean? Well, let's take my own personal experience, for example. I did not realize that my characters could have flaws at a very early age. I've been playing D&D since I can remember, since I was like 5 years old or something like that. My oldest character was named Flower Troublemaker. And it was because my sister and brother were playing D&D named, I don't even remember their names, Molly and Bob Troublemaker. And that's like my very first character that I can remember. She didn't even have a character sheet, that's how old she was. And I wanted to play the game that they, that they wouldn't let me play, so Dad sought pity on my soul and let me roll Flower Troublemaker, because I was very creative as a child. I named my character Flower. Anyway, that's a disadvantage all onto its own. Anyway, moving on from that topic, because that's a memory lane trip that I don't want to go down any farther. I did not know that characters could have flaws. I did not know that characters could have disadvantages. I only thought, like many gamers I know, that the character, however powerful or strong or smart or magical, the better. If they were smarter or faster or able to lift more, basically if they were a superhero, it was better for them. It did not occur to me at a very early age that all superheroes have weaknesses. All humans have weaknesses. All non-humans have weaknesses. There's a weakness to everything. And I did not comprehend that at a very early age. Dungeons & Dragons was very much about making a character the best you could without any flaws, as to escape the reality that everything is flawed. That was my mindset, without even realizing it. And that might be the mindset of a lot of gamers out there already. They treated the game like video games without even realizing that they were doing it. The more powerful that the character was, the better. So, being said, that made me feel like my characters were so similar. Like, even like my characters of different races and classes, it felt like they were all missing something. They were all not as ironed out as they could have been. I felt like there was something, you know, lacking from their personality. And I couldn't comprehend this until I watched The Gamers, the movie done by Dead Gentleman Entertainment, I believe, where they had a character who had hydrophobia. It was a very, very small clip that was made for shits and giggles only, but it really made a lasting impact on me that I didn't have a character with any sort of phobia. I'm sorry, there's like a bug or something flying around here. I didn't have a character who had any sort of fear or a nasty experience that they could draw from, or that made a lasting impact on them, or I didn't have a character with trauma or PTSD, or a character who just couldn't eat certain foods. Which is funny, because that's me. I have a texture problem, and I can't eat certain foods because it just feels weird to consume. So I think that I didn't have a character with a flaw because I myself felt very flawed as a human being. I'm still very flawed, which is great because it makes me human. But I didn't realize that I could do that for my characters too. So the first exploration that I had in this venture was with my character Bronx. I mentioned him in a previous video, I'm not quite sure which one, but I've talked about him. He was a half-orc child who was the result of a rape and pillage. And his mother had PTSD, and she abused him because of this, and because, you know, he ruined her life, and probably her vag. But anyway, he ended up killing her because she tried to kill him. It was self-defense. And in doing so, he got this gash on his cheek, and he went off into the woods and realized that if he was found, he would probably be killed. And he was adopted by this pair of paladins. And the paladins raised him to be one. And he became this righteous man trying to make up for his past mistakes, which included his own birth. He's a very troubled character. However, the whole conflict with his character, the whole flaw that he has, is that if someone sees his cheek, if they see the scar, if they see the white of his bone, that is his cheekbone, in the scar, or touch it, or even mention it, he goes into a rage. It's, in D&D terms, it's a barbaric rage, but in, like, real-life terms, he goes into a flashback, and he goes into a post-traumatic stress disorder result. Something, he has PTSD in that he killed his mother at a very young age, and it's traumatized him throughout the rest of his life, and he goes into a berserker rage, barbaric rage, when someone does something around his cheek, and he can't control it. That was my first venture into it. And I didn't even realize the depth of the disadvantage that he had. He's a very traumatic character, and I feel very bad for him. I just want him to, like, he needs protection at all costs. That poor baby. But anyway, here's my first venture into the disadvantages and the flaws. I created more characters later on who had these disadvantages and flaws. I even had a specific campaign where this is where I consider it my first step into creating flaws into a character. I made a character named Verbale Selsha, and he was a half-elf prince, estranged from the kingdom because he became a prisoner of war. And in the war, he lost an eye. It was a very recent injury. And that loss of an eye, and coming up with the calculations of how it affected all of his scores on his character sheet, was such a 180 from what I had normally experienced. I wholeheartedly embraced that flaw, and I made that flaw something that I could use to his advantage. So he had loss of depth perception. He halved his search and spot checks. He lost charisma from it because nobody wants to see a half elf with a missing eye. Until he healed and he wore an eye patch and he was smoking hot from what I doodled. Anyway, he was my first character that I really explored the advantages and disadvantages, knowing that I was doing it. So when I made Verbale, I was sold from that point on. I needed to have a flaw for every character I had from that point on. I didn't stick to that thought, but I wanted to. So before we get into why, let's get into how. There are when I was first getting into gaming, there weren't a lot of resources that you could use to give your characters flaws. And that's probably why my characters actually lacked flaws, was that I didn't know that it was even an option. So, going with some of the books that I've reviewed recently, that I'm going to bring up in a second, there are more and more flaws in books of late. It has become a little more mainstream to include disadvantages for your characters. So, going off of some of my books that I've reviewed recently, just to give a little name drop, there's Dust Adventures, Polaris, which is also a very good game, and Amazing Adventures. And I'm going to not review them, but touch on them in that order. So, Dust Adventures, it has a little section called Advantages and, special chapter. Chapter 4, Special Abilities. And this has special abilities, special powers, and disadvantages. My favorite section of the book. And these advantages or disadvantages are fear, mental limitation, physical limitation, wanted, and that's it. Vulnerability. They don't really have a lot of disadvantages in the book, but they do touch on it, and that's good. That's a great way to get your character to explore this avenue before getting too in-depth and losing, track of what's going on in the world around you. So then there's Polaris, which has a little more in-depth on the advantages and disadvantages. They even have a section of the book called Advantages and Disadvantages. I'm losing my tongue on this word, though. So advantages include good memory, concession. The character possesses a claim of small territory, so that's cool. Extra money, relentless, so on and so forth. Then the disadvantages include allergy, which is great, cowardice, mental disorder, which is what most of my characters have, disability, they are wanted, and that's it. Again, it's not a very big section, but if they cover it as well as I do in this book, then it doesn't need to be. And then lastly, it has The Amazing Adventures by Jason Fay. And then this book has a whole section on it called Character Traits. And this is, you can create your own traits, which is a very important part of the book that I feel is lacking from those two. Although, to be fair, I didn't actually see if they had to create your own, so I could be wrong. But this starts with creating your own traits. And they say traits because sometimes the disadvantage is, just part of who your character is. It might be a bad thing, but, it just makes your character who they are. Like, maybe your character always aims to the left. That's just something that they do. Maybe your character is just rude. That's just who they are. In this book, it actually lays those out for you to include in your stats as well. And this has a lot more variation and options to their disadvantages and advantages, which is all laid out as one thing. So, this also just says it's trait because there's an advantage and a disadvantage to that thing. For example, you are honest. You benefit +1 bonus to charisma, but you take 1 and -1 to your wisdom because it's hard to tell when someone's being dishonest to you. So that's that. And those are just examples of what's out there. Those are just brief touches on what you can find if you really look into it. There are tons of generators online which you can find if you are trying to find a disadvantage that isn't covered in any of the books around you. I know Dungeons & Dragons Pathfinder also have disadvantages in their books, but I wanted to especially mention those because I like the traits that they have in those books. Now that we've covered the how, let's tackle the why. Why should your character be missing an ear? Why should your character have fear of heights? Why should your character have traumatic experiences about potatoes? Well, it's because, A, it's very humorous if you do it right, which I do not condone laughing at disorders because that's awful in the real life. But in game, you can get away with it. But why? Why should you do it? Why should you make your character not the best that they can be? Because a character who is missing something has found something too. A character who has struggled has found strength in that struggle. A character who has experienced adversity is diverse. A character who might be racist or homophobic or sexist, a character who might be missing a limb, who might be missing an eye, a character who might have hydrophobia, arachnophobia, fear of heights, I don't know the title of that phobia, a character who might not have a sense of pain. These are all attributes to your character that can add more personality to that character. That character they might even be obsessed with that flaw, and that's how their personality is derived. They do everything that they can to avoid cracks in the sidewalk. They might have OCD in that they can only shoot 2 arrows at once, because odd numbers are weird like that. They might have, anxiety in that they are a paladin trying to fight their anxiety, and they're just trying to not run away from every conflict that they come across because fighting is scary. These are sympathetic problems that a character can have. These are real life situations that you can make in game to give your character more of a personality. This can give you also more experience with how to deal with these things in real life. For example, I as a human have anxiety, and if I were to have a character with anxiety, it would give the players around me an insight on what I go through on a daily basis, and it can make their understanding of that mental that mental disorder, that mental illness, how to deal with it, how to cope with it, how to help someone who has that disorder. It can also help you expand your person and who you've created. It can give you this little bitty character that you love and hold dear to your heart because they've been through so much and you just want them to be happy. You just want them to settle down in a farm and raise chickens, and that's all you want for them because they've lost so much to the war, and that's all you want for them, and that's all you got for their personality. That's already so much of a character, and I don't even know who they are. So, disadvantages are an advantage. There are pros to cons, and I highly recommend that if you're rolling up a character, give them a disadvantage. And this is even cool too. You can give them a disadvantage in game. You can have any sort of fight or an experience or any sort of chaos go on in the game, and then they can develop the disorder or the disadvantage or the flaw in game. They can lose a limb, they can develop a mental illness, they can develop a phobia. Another good example, I had a character named Garth Butts. It was a bad joke. But he was this like suave, smooth talker, always hitting on Rosa, the secretary. He was Ian's character. He had like this cool, like hit to the jive personality, and he had like amazing skills in battle because his first encounter with the apocalypse that happened in the D20 campaign that we were playing, he had a silver trophy. He tied it to the end of a broomstick and shoved it down a werewolf's throat, and he earned the name Werewolf Slayer after that, or something similar to that. He was really cool. But the moment he was put into a leadership position, because he had taken such charge in battle, there was a resurrected pharaoh from the museum nearby who had claimed Garth as the leader of the pack because he had shown such paladinic prowess. He was flustered and flabbergasted and he lost all of it. He had a mental breakdown just like that because he apparently had social anxiety. And that might have just been me as a battle role player coming out, but it added to his character in that he pretended to be this person who he wasn't, and when he was put on the spot, when it was revealed, when the layers of his suaveness were ripped apart, it revealed that he was just a normal guy who didn't know what he was doing. And that made him humble. It made him so humble. And on top of that, it also made him a more likable character because he had a struggle that, was suddenly revealed. And that struggle was exposed to the rest of the characters, and they realized, wow, he isn't such an asshole after all. He's actually going through a lot. And that being said, you can do this with your own characters. If you have a character whose personality is not likable, give them a reason for it. That's all I gotta say for that. So you can use this to your advantage in so many ways. There are so many advantages to the disadvantages. And I think that's another good point to mention is that Garth being put in the leadership position made me as a player uncomfortable, which made me realize more about myself. So to have a character have a flaw, you can realize flaws within yourself. And if you want to, you can work on those flaws. I'm very not comfortable in the leadership position, but since that experience in that game, I feel more comfortable with taking charge. I feel more comfortable with branching out and hosting others and telling others, this is the way to do things. So, here I am talking to you guys about how to play a game, and I can guarantee you 10 years ago I would not have been comfortable doing this. So, there's so much that you can benefit from doing a disadvantage. I highly recommend that you do it. It's one of my favorite parts of the game, to figure out the problems with your characters so that not only you can solve the problems within yourself, but your characters can have a personality, they can have a mission to explore. Maybe they lose a limb and it's their life goal to find a prosthetic that works. I don't know. It's up to you. You can decide this. If you actually have a story that you'd like to talk about something that your character has gone through, please comment below. I love to hear stories about that. We did talk about disabilities in another video. I will link that below. I think I already mentioned that. But this is kind of a broader topic of not just disabilities, but other types of personality flaws too. Like they have some sort of sexism going on, or they have a hierarchy problem, or a classism, or even colorism, depending on what type of campaign you're playing. So it's really up to you to decide. And if you have any interesting stories about something going on with your characters, I would love to hear it. You have no idea. And I hope that this video helps you, even if you're new or experienced. So, I'm going to stop rambling. My face hurts a lot, so I will cut the video there. Thank you guys so much for joining me in this beginner's video. Look forward to more in the near future. We have a lot more videos coming your way. So, on behalf of the entire cast and crew of the Dwarven Tavern, I am your host, Lyric, once again bringing you a beginner's video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we wish for you to want for nothing but adventure, and at first I feared it, then I charged. Thank you guys for watching, and we will see you next time.